Chico Chugg.
The Misadventures of Chico Chugg, Chapter 2, Part 1. When Dad got home later that night, Mum was up and waiting for him. I was sitting on her lap and we were watching telly. "You're still up," said Dad. I knew he was surprised to see that Mum hadn't gone to bed already. "Are you happy?" was Mum's immediate reply. Taken aback, Dad looked like he wasn't sure what she meant. "Happy with what?" he replied. "Your life, work, home, you know, the time you have for yourself, everything." "Where's all this coming from?" asked Dad, starting to look a bit worried. Mum told him what had happened when she'd got home from work and how it had made her feel that something had to be done to bring the family back together again. I was listening intently. "When was the last time you really felt we were having fun as a family?" she asked. Dad frowned, concentrating. Last year on that narrowboat, I expect," he replied. "I agree," replied Mum excitedly. "So, this is what I propose. We buy a boat of our own." "You mean so we can go on the canals whenever we want?" "No, not just for holidays," answered Mum. "I mean live on a boat." Now Dad was looking really confused. His eyebrows danced up and down. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I could imagine us all staying on a boat for the long school holidays, but did Mum mean permanently? Dad was looking unsure, and I must say I was wondering what she would say next. "We could sell the house, give up work, home tutor the children, and have more time together again," said a very excited Mum. So she did mean permanently. "Don't worry," she said, "I've got a plan." And she showed him a piece of paper covered in writing, and this is what it said. "Give up work, sell the house, home tutor the children, spend less money because a boat is cheap to run, have savings in the bank from selling the house, Hilary finish writing book, Harry write more songs, read whenever we want to, start hobbies again, draw, paint, sew, fish, travel whenever we want to, have friends to stay for holidays, have adventures." At the bottom of the page, in capital letters, was written, "Have more time together as a family." There was a stony silence as he finished reading the list. Mum was looking at Dad and me with a worried expression on her face. What do you think Dad's reaction was? His serious face began to smile. Then he grinned. Then he made me jump with a big belly laugh. "Ah, it's brilliant!" he shouted. "A little short on detail, but it's brilliant." I started to bark and chase my tail. Mum started to laugh as well, and they both swayed from side to side as they hugged each other. There was such a commotion that for a minute we didn't notice Charlotte and Jimmy standing in the doorway. "What's all the noise about?" complained a sleepy-eyed Charlotte. "Something momentous has happened," beamed Dad. "Remember how much fun we used to have when we first got Chico, going for walks, playing games together and having fun? Well, it's not been like that lately, has it? Mum's always working and so am I. We hardly see each other anymore. I'm worried that you two are growing up so quickly and Mum and I are missing it. Mum and I both feel we need to be together more as a family." The twins looked at each other confused. "Well, Mum's had a genius idea." "We're not moving houses, are we?" asked Charlotte. "Well, sort of," replied Mum. "One way we can all be together more is if me and Dad give up work. And there's a way we can do this. If we sell the house." "But where would we live?" asked Charlotte, frowning. "Well," Mum continued, "we'd use the money from selling the house to buy a narrowboat, and there'd be enough left over to have some savings in the bank." She paused again, looking at the twins carefully, and then went on. "We could live off our savings and any money Dad makes from his gigs and songs. I also want to finish my book and try and sell some copies, so that may bring in some money, and I could always do odd days of supply teaching, you know, fill in for teachers who are sick." Jimmy and Charlotte just stared. I couldn't tell if they liked the idea or not. "What about school?" asked Jimmy. "Well, I've thought about that. Dad and I could teach you at home so you wouldn't have to go to school. Think of all the adventures we could have." Jimmy couldn't contain himself. "What? No school?" he yelled. "What a great idea! When could we do it? Have you found a boat yet? Wait till I tell Mark." Hang on a minute, Jimmy. I'm glad you're so enthusiastic, but there's still lots to discuss and organise, said Mum. But Jimmy didn't hear her. He'd already danced away into the lounge, shouting, "Yippee! No school!" Charlotte hadn't said anything, and she didn't look excited or enthusiastic. "What's wrong, Charlotte?" said Mum. "You loved it on the boat last summer." "But that was a holiday," Charlotte said quietly. "It'd be different if we lived on a boat. What about our friends? When would we see them? There's not much room on a boat, so where would we put all our stuff? And I love school. I can't imagine never going again. It's all right for Jimmy. He doesn't like it anyway, but I love it." Poor Charlotte. I tried to cheer her up by licking her toes as they stuck out from underneath her pyjamas, but I don't think she even noticed. Mum came over and gave her a hug. "Listen, sweetie," she said gently. "I know you'd miss school and your friends at first, but honestly, Dad and I could make learning just as much fun as it is at school, and your friends could come and visit us whenever you want them to. The main thing is that we could be together more as a family." Charlotte didn't look convinced and looked like she was going to cry. In the silence we could hear Jimmy upstairs now, still jumping about and shouting, "Yippee! No school!" "All right," said Dad. "Let's leave this until tomorrow. It's too late at night to talk now. Let's sleep on it and see how we feel in the morning." So everyone went up to bed, leaving me downstairs to curl up in my basket, wondering what would happen next. The Misadventures of Chico Chugg, Chapter 2, Part 2. The next morning was Saturday, and Mum and Dad got up exceptionally early. It didn't look as if they'd slept much, as they still looked tired. I was excited because it meant an early breakfast and walk with Dad, and by the time we got back, the twins had only just got up. This turned out to be a very unusual Saturday. Instead of the twins rushing off to ballet and football, Mum going shopping and Dad going for a sound check for his gig later that night, we all got in the car together with Mum announcing that we were going to look at narrowboats to get a clearer idea of what it would be like to live on one all the time. "The boat we went on last year was very basic," said Mum. "I just want to go and look at the sort of boat we could afford to buy if we sold the house. It would be bigger and much more comfortable," she said brightly, trying to convince Charlotte. It was very quiet in the car. No one was speaking, and I was beginning to get worried, wondering how things would turn out. I always sat quietly in the back of the car now. I'd never forgotten what happened on the drive home from the pet shop. The marina was in a village called Crick and wasn't far from where we lived. When we got there, the sun was shining and Charlotte was starting to look slightly more relaxed. There was a friendly lady called Michelle in the sales office who had a black spaniel dog. While she showed everyone pictures and details of some boats, the little black spaniel started to talk to me. "Bonjour, my name is Henri," he said, pronouncing his name Henri. "What's yours?" "Oh, I'm Chico Chugg," I replied. "I am living here on a boat, and you?" I could just make out what he was saying, but he spoke in a way I'd never heard before. Just as I was about to answer, the twins rushed up and started patting Henri. "Oh, aren't you beautiful?" exclaimed Charlotte. "What's your name then?" "His name's Henri," said Michelle. "We bought him when we lived in France, and he came back to England with us a few years ago." Now I understood why Henri sounded so strange. He was from France. "Well, I'm not sure if we're going to live on a boat yet," I told him. "It all depends if we can find a nice one. Do you like living on a boat, Henri?" "Oui," replied Henri. "It's much better than living in an house, or where there is someone close by." Yes. That sounded very appealing. Dad had told us we would be looking at older boats that weren't so expensive. He'd often say with a cheeky grin on his face that he felt he was quite a handy man. "I could do any work the boat needs by myself," he said confidently. "I could help too," said an enthusiastic Jimmy, who was still very excited about Mum's idea. "You could teach me how to use a saw, and I could help build stuff." "I don't think it'll be that easy," snapped Charlotte. "Anyway, you'd have to be careful, Jimmy. You know how clumsy you are. Working with hammers and saws can be very dangerous. If we're out somewhere on the boat, we won't be able to drive you to hospital if you cut your thumb off, you know." "Oh, Charlotte," said Mum, "no one's going to hospital. Let's just wait and see what the boats are like. Maybe Dad won't have to do too much work on it anyway. Mum hoped so. She knew exactly who Jimmy got his accident-prone tendencies from. Michelle said we could go and look at the boats now if we wanted to, so we followed her down to the marina where dozens of prettily painted narrowboats were lined up neatly at their moorings. It didn't start well. The first boat we looked at was lovely on the outside, painted in traditional boat colours of blue, red and green. But inside it was a different story. It was dark and dingy because of the small circular windows called portholes. There was a fusty smell and the carpets and curtains were old and faded. The bathroom was small and the tiles looked stained. The kitchen had battered cupboards and looked like it would need a lot doing to it to get it looking nice. I could probably do some of the work, said Dad, looking concerned. I couldn't imagine us living on it at all. Maybe on a holiday for a few weeks, but not all the time as our home. I could tell Charlotte hated it by the look on her face. Even Jimmy didn't look so keen. Mum was very disappointed. The next boat was even worse, and it didn't even look that nice on the outside, with the paint chipped off and rust appearing in lots of places. Oh dear. Now Charlotte looked like she'd completely lost interest, and even Mum was beginning to look a bit disheartened. Perhaps we could afford to spend a bit more, said Dad. Get a newer boat that doesn't need so much work doing on it. What about that one over there? Dad pointed towards a boat moored by itself with a for sale sign in the window. It was just one colour, a pale blue, with nice big rectangular windows and lovely pots of flowers on the roof. Its name was painted on the side in simple letters and it was called Which Way? Well, actually, you're in luck, said Michelle. It only went on sale today. It is more expensive, but if you want to look around it, I'm sure the owners wouldn't mind. So suddenly we were climbing down into a light and welcoming boat. All the walls were covered with pale modern wood and the large windows let in lots of sunshine. The doors of the kitchen cupboards were a shiny red and it was clean and fresh. The bathroom was the same size as ours at home. It even had a full-sized shower finished with pretty bright white tiles. The two bedrooms were small. The first one had a door that, when open, revealed a space the exact length of a single bed, with just enough space to walk down the side. There was another single bed above it. Opposite the small bedroom was an area where a small desk had been built in. "We could put our computers here and make a little studio," suggested Dad. "I could write my songs and Mum could write her book." The next bedroom was the exact size of a small double bed, which was built in right up against the wall with enough room to walk down the other side. At the end of the bed was a small set of drawers on one side and a small dressing table on the other. In the middle were two little steps up to two glass doors that opened out onto the front deck. The curtains were new and light and it had a lovely fresh smell of wood. There was a lounge with a black stove in the corner that had a fire glowing in it. "How long is the boat?" Dad asked the owners. "Just over 21 metres, they told us. "Is that about the same length as a bus?" asked Jimmy. I could see he was trying to visualise just how long the boat was. "Actually, almost 2 buses, replied Dad. "I'd forgotten how narrow these boats are," said Charlotte quietly, with a frown of disapproval on her face. "I bet Dad could only just lie down across the width of the boat." "Oh, Charlotte," said Dad, "that's why they're called narrowboats. At least we've got a bit more headroom on this boat than the last two. Look, my head's not touching the ceiling at all." The back deck was large enough for more than 2 people to stand on, and Michelle said that it was called a cruiser stern. I decided it would be a great place for me to sit when we were chugging. "What do you think of this boat, Charlotte?" asked Mum. "Oh, it's okay," replied Charlotte. "It's certainly nicer than the other two, but it's so much smaller than our house." The owners of the boat were very friendly and everyone looked like they were starting to relax at last. We discovered that the boat was 4 years old and that the people had had it made especially for them when they retired. However, recently the lady had developed painful knees and was finding it more and more difficult to get on and off, so that's why they decided to sell it. While they were chatting, I was beginning to get bored, so I decided to go back outside and see if I could find Henri. I pulled gently against my lead and it began to extend. I knew it would let me go quite a long way before Dad noticed. As I got up the steps onto the back deck, I noticed that the boat next door had its back doors open too. I could just hear the gentle thud, thud, thud of its engine. It was a very pretty boat with beautiful paintings on the inside of its back doors. The paintings were of castles on hillsides surrounded by rivers. I couldn't quite see inside the boat, but I could smell something that made my mouth water. Could it be? Yes, it was. Bacon, my favourite. I began to feel really hungry. Before I knew it, I found myself climbing carefully down into the other boat. What I hadn't realised was that, as I'd crossed onto the other boat, my lead had wrapped around a handle. This was the handle that you pushed to make the engine go faster. As I walked down the steps towards the delicious smell, the lead was pulling the handle down and the engine was beginning to rev up. This is when it all became a bit of a blur. Chico Chugg. The Misadventures of Chico Chugg, Chapter 2, Part 3. As I jumped down the last step, the lever was tugged down almost as far as it could go and the engine roared. I panicked, tried to scramble backwards up the stairs, got caught up in the lead and pulled it even tighter. The engine roared louder still. It scared me so much that I started to bark and chased madly round, getting more and more tangled as I did so. Suddenly, a man's bald head appeared through a little door on the side of the boat, and he didn't look very happy. "What's going on?" he bellowed. By now the twins and Mum and Dad had appeared. I was still barking, but had stopped jumping about because my lead was so caught up I couldn't move. "Oh, Chico, what are you doing?" shouted Jimmy as he ran to me. "Shh, now, you silly dog. You're all caught up." I can tell you I was shaking long after Mum and Dad had apologised and calmed down the owner of the boat. "It's all right," he said at last. "No harm done." The man said his name was Stan and that he'd lived alone on his boat since his wife died. He even invited us all to go inside and look around it. Mum carried me in her arms as she walked around the boat, and I noticed Stan was keeping a wary eye on me. The children thought the boat was beautiful. Although it was very old, it had been lovingly cared for. There were plates on the walls that had colourful silk ribbons threaded around the edges of them. Very shiny brass kettles and ornaments were placed around the black stove, and delicate lace framed every window. Dad fell in love with the intricate and shiny engine, oohing and ahhing as Stan explained how it worked. After looking at Stan's boat, we went and found Michelle again in the sales office. "Well, did you like Which Way?" she asked. "She's perfect," replied Mum. "There's just one more vital question," said Dad. "Have you got any residential moorings here? We'll want to travel around the canals for the summer, but we'll need to moor somewhere over the winter months. I guess it's impossible to move around if the canal freezes." "A residential mooring has just become available for you to use in a couple of months," answered Michelle. "Well, that settles it," said Dad. "Perfect. This feels like it's meant to be. A lovely boat and a mooring, and not too far from all our family and friends. We can keep the car here and get about as normal when we're moored." It was very different in the car on the way home. Instead of a stony silence, there was chatter between Mum and Dad about how and where they could put things. Charlotte was still quiet, and Jimmy was stroking and talking to me while I looked at him excitedly. "Well, Chico, what do you think then? Do you think you'd like living on a boat? You wouldn't be on your own so much, would you? I bet you'd like that, wouldn't you?" As a reply, I wagged my tail and licked Jimmy's hand. "See, Charlotte, even Chico wants to go and live on a boat," said Jimmy. "OK, Jimmy, leave your sister alone now. She'll come round to it eventually," said Mum. I hoped so, but I had a feeling it may take her a while. The atmosphere became more and more intense over the next few weeks as Mum and Dad got excited about the boat idea. They had discussions with the twins some evenings about how they thought their lives might change. Charlotte didn't always agree, but gradually she started to soften towards the idea. This first happened one Saturday afternoon when her best friend Emily came round to play. I heard Charlotte tell Emily what we were planning to do. Charlotte was surprised by Emily's reaction. Instead of Emily agreeing with Charlotte's attitude, she said that she wished her Mum and Dad would do something so exciting. She saw very little of her mum and dad, as they were always working and she was often at the childminder's. "How exciting to learn stuff at home from your mum and dad. Think of all the adventures you'll have living on a boat," she'd said enviously. Time passed by quickly, and before long the house went up for sale. Mum and Dad handed in their notices at work, and everyone had to sort through their belongings and decide what they would keep. Space is limited on a boat, and they couldn't possibly keep everything. Imagine having to get rid of all your furniture and most of your books and toys. The last school day of the summer term arrived, and Charlotte said sad goodbyes to her friends. "Don't worry, sweetie," Mum said when she got home from school that day. "Your friends can always come and see us." "Yes, but will they want to?" murmured Charlotte. The house sale went through quickly, and we were moving on to the boat on the second Monday of the summer holidays. Mum and Dad had sold most of the furniture and given away lots of their things to friends and to charity shops. It had been hard for the twins, but they'd started to realise that actually, when they were forced to decide what to keep, it hadn't been so difficult after all. They had to admit they hadn't played with lots of their toys for a long time, and they only needed to keep a few. Finally, moving day arrived, and I was very excited, as were Mum, Dad and Jimmy. Charlotte still wasn't happy. We waved goodbye to our old house and set off for our new adventures on board Whichway. It took a couple of days for us to unpack all our things. Whichway seemed to have lots of cleverly concealed storage spaces, and the twins enjoyed seeing who could find the next hidden cupboard. Jimmy found that his bottom bunk hinged up to reveal a large storage space under his bed. Charlotte found a hidden drawer under the dining room bench seat, and Mum loved the way the table and bench seats made into an extra double bed. "You could use this when people come to stay," she said. Dad said he was surprised at how much storage space there was and how all their belongings seemed to fit so well. The only thing that I found strange was the feeling you had as the boat rocked from side to side when people moved about. I remembered I hadn't liked it on our holiday, but hopefully I would get used to it. It didn't appear to be worrying Charlotte and Jimmy. They put my basket by the stove in the lounge so I'd be nice and warm, and I was very happy. Even Charlotte seemed a little happier. We spent the next few days settling in. Dad had said we should stay moored at Crick before we set off on a holiday to get used to how everything worked in the boat. "It would be much better if we iron out any problems while we're moored here," he said. "At least we have the car, so if we need to go and buy anything, we can still get to the shops." Through all the hustle and bustle, we began to learn how to move around the boat without getting each other's way or bumping ourselves on cupboards and shelves. The twins soon discovered that things needed to be put away if they weren't being used, otherwise the boat became untidy very quickly. Mum said that on a boat it's called stowing away, which somehow made it more fun than tidying up. It also took a few nights to get used to all the strange groaning and creaking sounds Whichway made as she cooled down in the evening and warmed up again in the morning. "It's like she's talking to us," Jimmy observed, and he was right. This was just what it sounded like. The water that came out of the taps in the kitchen and bathroom came from a water tank that was hidden away under the front deck. We discovered that we had to fill it up every 3 days. "I don't have to have a shower every day," Jimmy told Mum helpfully. "The water would last longer if I had one a week." "Nice try, young man," Mum had replied, "but I think we'd all rather you had a shower every day." The toilet was different from the one at home. It had a button to flush it and a sort of box underneath that came out. The responsibility for emptying it had fallen to Dad. "I will do anything but that," Mum had stated on the first day. Dad had bought a satellite dish for the television, installed it on the roof of the boat, and with a little help from the twins, tuned it in. "A little more to the left. No, right. Stop!" they had yelled out of the hatch door when he tried to align it. It was worth it. We had a great picture and more channels than we'd had at home. I noticed that Charlotte's mood improved a bit as the days went by, and Whichway began to feel more like home. She seemed to enjoy seeing more of Mum and Dad, and was even getting on better with Jimmy. One afternoon, as Charlotte, Mum and we were out for a walk around the marina, Mum said, "You seem a bit happier, sweetie. Do you think you're going to like our new life?" Charlotte thought for a minute and said, It's better than I thought it would be. I think it's all right. Well, replied Mum, giving Charlotte's hand a squeeze, that's good enough for now. So this was it, the start of our new life. I was excited and couldn't wait to see how different it might be from our old one. Would we be happy all living so closely together? Would we have more fun? What sorts of adventures would we have? Only time would tell.